Hi, this is April Rain, and today I am sitting in as guest host of the Benjamin Dixon Show. Ben is out of the country, and I am honored to be co-hosting or guest hosting for him today. And so we're just going to jump right into our discussion. I want to first give you a little bit of background about me. I've been an attorney for the past 20 years, and I decided that that was not my passion and my calling, and so I left my job and decided I wanted to work in social media and digital media, and so I've been writing and working as a blogger and freelance writer for the past year now, which has been really fulfilling. And through all of that that's been going on, I met with Ben, and he was silly enough to give me a shot on his show today. So here we are. So for the next hour, we're going to be discussing politics because that's part of my background as well. President Obama, Hillary Clinton, the race for 2016, and where Black people fit into all of that, and progressives and Democrats in general. So what I want to start by saying is that President Obama is not our savior. And I think that will sit poorly with some because when he was nominated and ran and became president, I think a lot of people thought that there were going to be different things that he would be able to do or that he had promised to do that haven't been done, and so that they've been disappointed by his efforts. And I think I want to sort of delve into that a little bit more and think about exactly who he is, because when he ran, when President or then Senator Obama ran for office for president, he is and was then a moderate, and so I don't think we should be thinking that he was some kind of Malcolm X revolutionary who was going to make sweeping and decisive changes for the country because he just wasn't, because that's not who he is, and in fact that's not who he campaigned as. So we had the hope movement, and that's what his campaign was all about, but I think that it was a hope for the future. And if you look back at his accomplishments over the past 6 or 7 years now, I think that we can see that they're definitely there overall, although there are still some problems. And I should say from the outset that I drink the Obama Kool-Aid pretty vociferously on a regular basis. I used to say that I got it through IV drip, and that's still sort of true. I've been an Obama supporter from the beginning, and when I say from the beginning, I actually mean from 2004, the Democratic National Convention, when he was the premier speaker. And I remember walking across my bedroom floor and literally being stopped in my tracks, like, who is this guy? And he wasn't even in the Senate at that time, but, you could sort of just feel his presence and know that there was something special about him. So once he ran, he was my guy. He was the person that I had decided that I was going to support from the very beginning. And so I wasn't one of those people who jumped on after his surprise victory in Iowa. And because then, I remember my parents, that's when my parents became Obama supporters, was after his surprise win in Iowa, when it became clear that he really had a shot at winning. But I was there from the beginning with him and still am to this day, but that's not to say that I can't critique some of his positions and some of the things that he has done and things that he hasn't done. But overall, I think he's done a good job. But for example, his position on marriage equality and the fact that it's sort of evolved over time, I'm not exactly sure what that means. I'm happy that he's come around and seen the light and realized that, that marriage should be for every consensual, adult who wants to take part in the beautiful tradition of marriage, if they so choose. But I wish it had not taken him so long to get there. So that's where I am with President Obama, and so I think that when you really listen to his policies, it was sort of um, revolutionary may not be the best word, but it was a stark contrast, obviously, from the candidates that we had ever had in the past. And he had charisma. He definitely had that swagger, and he still has it. I think we see it more now in his second term when, what did he say? I won both of my elections, so he doesn't, have to prove anything to anybody anymore. And he's got his lasting legacy of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act that's going to stay with him and with us, thank God, forever. But he wasn't this firebrand. He wasn't. I think John McCain ran as the Maverick, right? And that's not who President Obama has ever been. He's sort of been cool, calm, and collected. And so when people say now, I can't believe that he hasn't done this, or he hasn't lived up to my expectations, I think we need to check what our personal expectations were, because maybe that's more on us. Maybe that's something more that we attributed to him as opposed to what the reality actually is and was in 2004 and 2008. So, I go back to, my initial thought that he's not our savior, that there are so many things that we have to do on our own. And also we need to talk about the fact that, even if he was, he still wouldn't be able to do the things that we want him to do, because there's this little thing called Congress, right? And so we have to talk about, the checks and balances that are automatically written into the Constitution, which makes sense, right? Because we're not a monarchy, we're a democracy, we're a republic. And so we want to ensure that no one person or group of people has too much power. So immigration reform, I think, is a great example of the fact that President Obama has wanted to move, has wanted to make changes. And again, they may not be changes that everybody wants. They may not go as far as everybody wants them to go. But his plan is definitely better than the current plan that we have, which is no plan whatsoever. But he did not get the support that he should have from Democrats. And, maybe we need to take a minute and talk about that. These are the people that campaigned for him, who, thought that he was going to be fantastic in office, and yet we've seen time and time again that they have not been supportive of him. They are pushing away from him. We definitely saw that in the midterm elections in 2014, where, we had Democrats really not being anti-Obama, but at least being not as supportive, so running on their own record, whatever that was, if any, as opposed to the record of accomplishment that we can see President Obama has. So, when we talk about Congress and we talk about, the support that he needs to get things passed that we want to see, then we need to talk about the fact that he hasn't had the support in Congress that he has needed to actually make effectual change. And I think that's unfortunate, and that it's really to our detriment. It's to the detriment of the country that he has not gotten that support. So immigration reform, we can talk about, even the Affordable Care Act and having a single-payer universal system. Well, that may have been something that he wanted, but he also knew that that was never going to pass through Congress with the Republicans, and even with some of the Democrats. And so you sort of have to move back a little bit and take as much as you possibly can and deal with it from there and trying to make the system even better. But again, having the Affordable Care Act overall is better than what we had from the beginning. So back again to the point that President Obama is not our savior. I think that he's done a good job at where with what he's given. If by any metrics, if you want to look at the economy, if you want to look at healthcare, if you want to look at unemployment numbers, job creation, they have all improved in the past 7 years since President Obama has been in office. And that is in spite of the Democrats who are supposed to be part of his party. So that's where we are. But then the question becomes, even if he was our savior, what are we going to do next? Right? Because he can't run for a third term. And in fact, I don't even think I want him to. I would really like to see President and Mrs. Obama get some rest. I think that there's been so much going on, not even not even politically, but just personally. I can't even imagine the stress that they go through trying to raise two beautiful daughters, in this bubble, dealing with all of the overt and covert racism that is out there daily, being concerned about their safety, especially with the Secret Service. I'm not even sure if I want to discuss that topic, but the Secret Service, which has been less than stellar, at least with respect to the break-ins at the White House in recent past, and some of the little trips that they've taken that have turned out to be less than professional. There's me being nice. So I think that they just need a rest. I think that they signed up for 8. Of course, they were hoping to get reelected. And so they signed up for 8. And then at the end of that 8, it's time for them to take a break and get some rest, be out of the public eye for a while, set up house again, wherever that's going to be. I'm assuming that it's going to be in New York, somewhere perhaps near where Malia ends up going to school. Maybe they'll go back to Chicago at the very beginning. We just heard that the Obama Library, the official library, will be in South Side of Chicago, which I think is a wonderful idea. I'm very happy with that choice. And it really makes sense. I don't think it's pandering at all. I think that's where he got his start. The First Lady will tell you that she is Southside, and don't get it twisted, because that's who she is, and won't hesitate to let you know that that's the case. And so I think it makes sense. The video that they put out was fantastic, announcing that the official Obama Foundation library is going to be in Chicago. Because I think President Obama said, the south side of Chicago is where I became a man, and that really hit me to my core. That's where he met his wife, that's where his children were born, or in Chicago, and so that makes perfect sense to me. But I really want to see them get a rest. As much as I love every single picture I see of the first family, whether individual or as a group. I'm always buoyed by the fact that we have this, amazingly beautiful, successful, intelligent Black family in the White House. And I have children who are 11 and 15, and really, President Obama is the only president they've ever known. They were alive, obviously, 9 years ago, but they were very young and weren't interested in politics at all. And so that's an amazing fact to me, that the norm for them is having a Black president. So that's probably one of the most awesome things from a personal perspective for me, that anybody else it's just not even, I think it tells my kids from the very beginning, from their formative years, that they truly can be whatever they want to be, including President of the United States. Because when I was growing up, back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, right, it was all about Well, you can do anything. You can be anybody you want to be. And eventually, we had Ronald McNair. So eventually, yes, you can be an astronaut. And we had black doctors and black lawyers, and which I became, and other very prominent people, but we never had a role model at this level. And so the fact that my kids do, not necessarily that they want to be president or that I want them to be president, although living in the White House as grandmother, like Mrs. Robinson, might be cool. But the fact that they know that they can aspire to that highest position in the country if they so choose is really amazing to me. But I want the first daughters to get a break. They have grown up in the White House. They have both become teenagers there. I think the Secret Service taught Malia how to drive, because the Obamas are not allowed to drive cars for security reasons. So there are a few things that they have missed. Not many, and obviously there are definitely perks to being in the White House, but there are a few perks that they have missed by, living in this bubble in Washington, which is obviously not their home originally. So not only did they have to walk away from friends, but they also had to walk away from normalcy. So I would like to see the entire family, and Mrs. Robinson too, have an opportunity just to live, for a year or what have you, out of the public eye, as the departing presidents often do. President Obama can start working on his memoir, and even more important for me, Michelle Obama can start working on her memoir, because that's where the stories are going to be. I will never forget that one event, and she was being heckled by someone, and her response was, this is something that I don't do well, and you can just hear, you just heard a little twinge of South Side, and I remember cheering, because, for a moment there, she was able to break loose and be who she really was, sort of take off the kitten heels and show you that she was not to be trifled with. So I love that moment. So then the question is, once the Obamas leave the White House and presumably leave Washington, what are we left with? And what are we doing to prepare ourselves for that eventuality? And I'm talking about Democrats and progressives. And, I don't really get into labels very much. So regardless of whether you call yourself a Democrat, a progressive, or a liberal, I'm not sure it makes a lot of difference, when we're talking about what side you're on of most social and economic issues. So call yourself what you want to. I'm talking about those people who, voted Democratic, voted presumably for President Obama, and will presumably vote for the Democratic nominee in 2016 and beyond. Whoever those people are, whatever you want to identify as, that's who I'm talking to. So I think we need to prepare, and I'm not sure that we have yet. I think that there's definitely going to be a void, just because of who President Obama is and the things that he's accomplished. Unfortunately, sort of like with my kids, I see them every day, and so it doesn't look like they're really growing, right? It doesn't look like they're changing because I see them every day. So the change that I see is literally, infinitesimal. And then every time we go to visit family, everybody's like, "Oh, you're getting so tall, and I can't believe," and yada yada yada, and it's like, "Oh yeah, I guess I can't see the top of his head anymore. I guess he has grown 3 inches or something." And I think that's going to be the way it is with President Obama. We're going to need 5 or 10 years to realize all that he has accomplished. And once we get to the point that the Affordable Care Act is commonplace and accepted, and I think we're close, right? Because even the Republicans are not pushing back against Obamacare. I mean, when they don't really vote for anything, they don't really do anything in Congress. But when's the last time that they even had a vote to repeal Obamacare? It's been a while, right? I think they stopped in the mid-50s or something like that, realizing that it was working and people were liking it. And I think that the numbers are going to do nothing but go up over time, as it becomes commonplace, like Social Security, like Medicare, like any government-run, government-assisted program. I think people are going to eventually come to see it as an everyday convenience that you really don't think about. So his legacy is there, but we haven't really, I don't think we've taken full advantage or fully appreciate what he has done for the country. So then the question becomes, who's next, right? Who are we going to have to attempt to fill his shoes and keep the country moving forward? And I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think that in addition to hopefully having another Democratic president, that we need to be moving forward in creating our own organizations and constituencies, and even pressuring our congresspeople to ensure that they are on the right track, because so many of them are not. I mean, President Obama is still in office, right? And he's not getting the support that he should. What in the world is going to happen come 2017? I can tell you that in January of 2017, I'm going to need a week of mourning. I'm going to be rending my garments, and the fact that they are not in the White House, the Obama family is not in the White House anymore, is going to cause problems. Like if they have some kind of moving party, I am there to help them pack boxes. Although I may chain myself to their truck so that they don't leave. I think it's going to be interesting, but we need to get prepared, for what comes next and for whom comes next, because I don't know what that's going to look like. And so we can talk about, for a little bit, who's on the horizon there, who wants it badly. And, obviously the front runner, and the only person that's announced to my knowledge is former senator and former first lady and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who obviously has the pedigree, is well known throughout the country and throughout the world. So name recognition is not going to be a problem for her. But I'm not sure that she's the best person for the job. So let's talk about that for a little bit. I think that what's going to be interesting is whether, and I'm going to call her Hillary here, not out of any disrespect, but just because she has become, she has become the one name candidate, and it's the first name for her, so she has become, a person that who you're talking about. So it's not out of any disrespect that I am calling her Hillary. I think that, but that's just the way it is, and even in fact, her organizations, are all about Ready for Hillary and so on. So I don't want that to be seen as disrespectful whatsoever, because I have a tremendous amount of respect for, her accomplishments and who she is and what she's done. But I think that there are going to be, we will never again see the amount of fervent support for a presidential candidate that we saw for President Obama. And that's not only because, he was the first black president, but also because of the type of campaign that he ran and the fact that he, sort of championed young people and got them to work on his behalf. And I think that was a big difference. Working with millennials and college-age students, I think that was a big difference from any campaign that we had seen, in the past, that he really knew to marshal the young voters, the 18 to 24-year-olds, and get them on his side. And so you felt a lot of energy from them just because, they were young and they were excited and they were motivated and they were right there on the front lines on his behalf. And I think we'll see that. We'll see some of it, but this was also really a watershed moment for the country, because although I'm not still sure what the phrase means, but there were some people out there who thought it was going to be our post-racial moment. That President Obama would ascend to the presidency, and that obviously that meant that racism was over, because how could anything or anyone be racist again, because he was now the president and he's a black man. Which, I mean, how many different examples can we look to as to how that's not the case? We can look at specifically things that have happened to President Obama and about President Obama to see that racism is still alive and well in this country, unfortunately. And some would argue, and I would probably argue as well, that things have become more overtly problematic since he has become president than they were before. So it was always sort of simmering, just under the surface, and it would bubble up too often, too often in the country. But now, there's a thought that, the recent and not so recent brutality and violence and death of black men might be attributed to the fact that they are sort of standing as proxy for President Obama. So in other words, and this is April's conspiracy theory of the day. I guess we need to put special music in here or something. But the fact that that there are some people that are so upset and outraged that we have a black person, a black man, a successful black man in office, and they don't know how to control their anger and their rage, and about this situation, that they have taken out their frustration and then their violence on black men. So these black men are sort of standing in as the proxy because they can't get to President Obama, thank God. They're going after any black person, man or woman. And let's talk about the fact that women, the violence against women is not being treated with the same urgency as the violence against men. And so they are sort of standing in the shoes of President Obama in the sense that, the violence and death and killing has been perpetrated against black men because people are angry, really, with President Obama, if you want to drill down into their dark little psyche or something like that. So now if we go back to the 2016 campaign, I think that it's going to be important. The fact that we have a very viable candidate as a woman running for office is a big deal, obviously, and having the first woman president is going to be a big deal. But I still don't think that we're going to see the fervent support that we did for President and then candidate Obama. And in part, that's because there is still bad blood, among many in the black community with respect to Hillary Clinton and, the Clinton machine. In the sense that, if you go back to the primary campaign in 2007 and early 2008, a lot went on with President, then candidate Obama and then candidate Clinton as they were battling for the Democratic primary nomination. There are those who believe that that Secretary Clinton and her team, leaked, or if not leaked, didn't tamp down the birther conspiracy, with President Obama, where was he born and what's his birth certificate say and all of that mess that is still going on, which, it's like, Yeah, obviously he's an American citizen. We haven't heard the dust up about Ted Cruz, that who was actually born in Canada but is running for president. And there's reasons why it's okay that I don't want to get into, because I'm not about to give any minutes, to Ted Cruz of all people. But there was definitely more of a dust up with President Obama's birth, and that still happens to this day, which makes no sense, because it's like, well, he's 7/8 done, right? He's got one more year. So even if you were to find some weird rare document that's got a different last name or says something whatever, I mean, what is your point, at this juncture in your life? Have you really spent the last 7 years trying to prove something that doesn't exist? I think that a lot of Black people, have long memories and remember sort of the vitriol that came from the Clinton camp in 2007. Some of the things that former President Clinton said, likening President Obama to Jesse Jackson, and when there was talk once again about Secretary Clinton's support for the Iraq War, and the fact that President Obama has always been against the war. President Clinton, famously said something like, this is the biggest fairy tale I've ever seen. And it was never clear whether he was talking about the distinctions that they were making about the Iraq War, or the fact that President Obama, then candidate Obama, was running for office at all. So we'll just let that hang sort of out there in the ether, but it is there. And even Secretary Clinton herself, when asked if she thought that then candidate Obama was a Muslim, she famously said, "Not as far as I know," or something like that. Something very equivocal. Instead of just saying, "No, he's not. He's a Christian, and let's move on," because his religion really shouldn't matter. I mean, that would have been the perfect answer, right? I don't. He's not, and even if he was, there's nothing wrong with having a Muslim president. So, next question. I think that our memories are long, and I think that Hillary Clinton, I wrote a piece for ebony.com, so there you go, there's a plug, Ebony, so you can go on ebony.com and read it, which said, is Hillary ready for Black voters? And I have an older piece actually that's called, something like, why I'm not ready for Hillary, which is her, her tagline, or was her tagline before she actually announced. So I think that, at least for me, I believe that Hillary Clinton's biggest challenge is going to be winning the Democratic primary in the nomination for president, because I think whoever wins the primary, Democrats are going to fall in line and support, because the very worst Democrat is better than the best Republican. So we may need to hold our nose and vote, but we're going to vote for the Democrat, because that Democrats vote for Democrats overwhelmingly and Republicans vote for Republicans. So I think the key for Hillary is going to be earning that Democratic nomination, and she's going to need Black voters to do so. She's going to need especially Black women voters, who I think, and I don't want to seem as if I'm talking as if Black people are a monolith, right? We know that they're not. I mean, we've definitely got Ben Carson, which, don't even get me started. Ben Carson, and we had Herman Cain and Alan West, and and Mia Love, and so there are definitely Black conservatives, Black Republicans out there. So I think people should always vote on the issues that matter to them most, as opposed to voting on any other premise. So regardless of whatever you label yourself, it really doesn't matter. It needs to be about who you believe is going to be the best candidate for the job, and who's going to be the best candidate for you and your family. So, I think that Hillary's issue is going to be persuading Black voters who have long memories to come aboard, come aboard the Clinton train and get her into the White House, which is where, she's always wanted to be. I think she's always wanted to be behind the desk as opposed to just in the White House. So we'll see. I see her attempting to make some inroads. She's mentioned, Freddie Gray. She's mentioned Mike Brown, although it took her, a few weeks to, once things started to die down a little bit in Ferguson, before she said anything. So we'll see. And I definitely don't want to, I don't want to see any of the candidates using the names of our fallen as political stepping stones. I don't want to see them stepping on the backs of Tamir Rice and Eric Garner and Renisha and so many others to say, hey, I'm down with the black people. That's not going to happen. That's not going to go over well for you at all. But I, excuse me, I see Hillary making some attempts, right? Because now all of a sudden, Bill Clinton's been out of office for 47,000 years, and only now is he admitting that mass incarceration actually got worse during his presidency. And and everybody's like, oh, look how selfless he's being, and and he's so real and so honest to admit that. And it's like his wife is running for president, so he's going to definitely fall on his sword and say whatever he needs to say to get her elected. And so he said that, and then lo and behold, surprise, surprise, a couple of days later, Hillary Clinton said, starts talking about mass incarceration and how we need to do more for those in prison, and justly imprisoned, and imprisoned for victimless crimes and that kind of thing. So, it's all part of the game, and sometimes I think we need to step back and really look at the big picture to figure out why people are doing what they're doing, and how or whether it's going to be effective. So I think because of the bad blood between Hillary Clinton and black voters, who she's definitely going to need. I mean, any poll from Nate Silver on down to Pew or whatever other poll you want to look at, black voters are definitely an impactful group. She's going to need to make some changes, I think, and do more to reach out to the black community and other communities of color. And it's going to be interesting to see who else actually gets in the race. I think that former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley is going to jump in there. He's made every indication that he is, and and I've said that for years. Growing up in the D.C. area for the last 20 years here, or not growing up, but being here for the last 20 years, I have really watched him ascend from mayor of Baltimore to governor. I was very interested that he didn't run for Senator Mikulski's seat when she announced her retirement, because that, to me, would have made more sense, just like President Obama and, in fact, former Senator Clinton did, take that spot, get yourself more of a national profile, and then attempt to run. But he's decided he's going to leapfrog over that, and good on him. We'll see how that goes for him. And I think that he has good name recognition. Obviously, nobody's going to have it as much as Hillary Clinton, not only for her own accomplishments, but also because obviously she's got the same last name as a former president. So you've already got that name recognition there. But I think he and if former Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders runs, Jim Webb from Virginia, I think the three of them on many issues are going to take much more, again with the labels, liberal/progressive stances than Hillary Clinton does, because she really is a moderate too. And it's going to force the pendulum to swing
further left toward more progressive causes, which I think only benefits the country when we're talking about social issues. So when we talk about immigration, for example, or the decriminalization of marijuana. I don't think we're going to get to legalization, true legalization nationwide, but the decriminalization, which I think is just as important, or if not more important, of marijuana and other social issues. I think that's going to be interesting to watch the debates. I believe they've got 6 planned to see where the candidates really come out on these issues. So, and again, going back to President Obama again, it's going to be interesting to see how these candidates address the sitting president, the incumbent, right? Because we've seen all too many times, as I discussed, Congress sort of running away from President Obama and his accomplishments to their peril in 2014. Let's talk about, who won and who lost and who was supportive of him and who wasn't, because there's definitely a correlation there. But I think for 2016, it's going to be really interesting to see. I think it's smart that nobody wants to run for Obama's 3rd term, right? They want to stand on their own and be their own person, and I get that. And and if you're going to be the president, you don't want to stand in the shoes of someone else. Hello, side eye to Jeb Bush, But at the same time, I think that touting the Democratic platform, which has to include the Affordable Care Act, which has to include various things that President Obama pushed through, is going to be crucial to win, because those things are successful. Those things, now that we've got them under our belt, we see that they have that the country is supportive of, even the Affordable Care Act, and President Obama's numbers continue to improve, in sort of the waning months of his presidency. So it's going to be interesting to see if the candidates for the Democratic primary and the nomination, are running as, completely not opposed to, but separate from President Obama, or if they're going to sort of attempt to ride the coattails of his accomplishments as much as they possibly can. So again, I'm going to be really interested in the debates to see, where they are, where they stand on the issues, and how far left they're going to go, because I think that's where you see, because it can only be scripted so much, right? Because you don't know what your opponent is going to say, but you're going to have to react to that. So I think that's where we're going to see the rubber meet the road. And right now, if we're talking about Secretary Clinton and O'Malley and Webb and Sanders, and I'm not sure who else might be in there. We still have some talk about Elizabeth Warren, although she said she doesn't want it, but Hillary said she didn't want it either. So we'll see on that. Of those candidates and potential candidates, I think that Hillary wins the nomination, because she has name recognition, because she is definitely going to have the most money, right? I mean, they talk about the fact that she's going to attempt to raise well over $1 billion for this election. $1 billion. We can talk about the federal election campaign laws and how they just I don't even know why they exist sometimes anymore, because they are not allowing regular everyday Joe six-pack or whatever what you want to call him have a integral part of the process. I think President Obama tried to bring that back in 2008 by saying, he was only going to accept, he was championing, smaller donations. So, $25, but you get a gazillion people to donate $25. It's just as effective as having some fat cats who are going to be looking for influence, donating much more money. So, I think that the biggest challenge for Hillary is going to be the Democratic primary nomination and securing the vote of Black voters, of disgruntled voters, of voters who, are like, you know what? I got Obama. He was my one, and I'm done. There's nothing else that you can do for me, so I'm not even interested in the political process. Or, I've seen so much negativity in the process that I'm not interested in participating any longer. I voted for Obama because he was Obama, but that's it. Nobody else lights the fire in my belly the way that he has. So that's going to be really interesting, because I think that not only will Hillary and whomever the nominee have to deal with some bad blood in Hillary's instance with Black voters, but also sort of some ennui among Democratic and progressive voters in general. And I feel a little bit of that only because I've watched so many of Democrats walk away or shy away from the accomplishments of President Obama. So it's like, you know what? If you don't want to be supportive of him and get behind him when he needs you, then I'm going to use my vote and not be supportive of you in the midterms or in 2016. But let me caution, and maybe this will be my ending topic. You gotta vote. Like, you gotta vote. Because we see that voting matters, and voting changes things, and and you can use the sort of tired line, if you don't vote, you can't complain, but it's really true. If you don't like the people that are in office, but you do nothing to remove them, you do nothing to affect structural and institutional change, then how can you expect things to improve? So unlike, Ed Schultz from MSNBC, who told people to sit out famously in 2010 because he, to sort of send a message to Democrats and to President Obama that they didn't like what was going on, which was just asinine. I'm definitely not saying that. I'm saying that you should register to vote, and you should definitely vote. And even if you have to hold your nose, or take some Tums or something as you're standing there in the voting booth, go vote. Not only is it your civic duty, and for most people, their right to do so. I really feel it's an obligation. And we can talk about the Voting Rights Act, 65, and and our ancestors, and you probably have some who are still alive, who fought and and bled, and some died so that we would have the right to vote. I just think it's imperative that we exercise our ability to do so, at every opportunity. And in fact, we saw some of that in Ferguson as well. It's not just the presidential election, right? So we always see the numbers drop off in off presidential election years. So when there's not a president on the ballot, right, there's a lot less activity and voting overall, because people don't, people are like, okay, well, president, I get that, that's important, but the other stuff, not so much, and so I'm not going to take time off of work, or I'm not going to spend the time to do that. But in fact, those are some of the most important elections, those that happen during the midterms. So, if you're talking locally, the Board of Education, if you have kids, or, if you're even interested in if you don't have kids, but you're interested in where your tax money is going, and you're concerned that, too much is going to education or not enough is going to education, guess when those elections are, right? They're very often in off election years. So, for example, 2014 was our most recent. Obviously, all of the local races, and those that may make the most difference to you on a daily basis, from governor on down, mayor and sheriff, and all of those elections very often happen in off years. And that's not to even mention all of the congressional races that occur. Senate, you run for Senate, that's 6-year term. So by definition, there's going to be an election in a midterm. And obviously, as a congressperson, the term is only 2 years. So there are going to be many midterm elections that feature congresspeople on the ballot. And so you know, that's where the rubber meets the road, in the sense that things that can have the most change, most directly, most quickly, happen very often at the local level, and that means midterm elections. And so that's why I think it's so important that we vote at every opportunity, whatever it is, anything other than dog catcher, which I don't think is a thing anymore. But if you're talking about governor, if you're talking about, your sheriff, your local sheriff, or if you're talking about the Board of Education and those races, they are just as important as the national races for your congresspeople and your president. So I'm saying vote, vote all the time. Vote at every opportunity. Find out where people stand on the issues that you care about and go support those candidates with your vote, and take your kids so that they can see, once again, that it is, a regular thing. It's like going to, renew your driver's license. Nobody necessarily likes to do it. Nobody likes taking off work to do it. But you need to do it. It needs to be done. And so it needs to be sort of rote behavior. If there's an election coming up, I'm going to vote. I'm going to go in early, or I'm going to go in late to work, or, leave early, so that I make sure that I do that. So I think that, sort of bringing it home, the most important thing in my mind for Hillary Clinton is to garner the votes of Black people, especially Black women, because women, we know that women, sort really swing, the voting electorate. It's going to be very important for her to garner our votes. And if she is able to, I think that she, or whomever the nominee is, the Democratic nominee, hopefully will ascend to the presidency. It's going to be really interesting. But as I look on the other side of the aisle at the people who have, either thrown their hat in the ring or talking about doing so, you've got Ben Carson, which, I mean, I could spend 10 seconds if you want me to, but that's just a no. And Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, once again, and I think Carly Fiorina, which is going to be interesting, if she sort of ascends to the top, if she sort of like rises like cream to the top of the group of candidates on the Republican side, I think it'll be interesting to watch how the media responds to having two women. Because I think they're already talking about what Hillary's wearing, and just sort of sexist, misogynistic, topics that she would just never, ever, like nobody ever talks about the suits that these gentlemen are wearing. The fact that they, came off the rack and they're poorly fit, and nobody goes into that. But it's all about, well, what type of shoes is she wearing, or what color is she wearing, and that's just a topic for another time. But I think it's unfortunate as a whole that we are still not there with respect to issues that impact women and feminism overall. So, if it does become a Hillary versus Carly race, I think the media is just going to be a huge fail, just because they don't know how to handle easy stuff, and this could become a potentially difficult situation, not because it should be, but just because they just don't know what they're doing very often. I think journalism sort of has become a lost art and a lost cause. But I think when we look at the candidates on the other side, they are so far right. There are no moderates yet that have announced, and I think that they are taking positions already which are just diametrically opposed to where the country stands. We're talking about marriage equality. There have been some crazy statements lately, from Ben Carson, not surprisingly, and some others. But I think that I'm hoping that, um, that we get another Democratic president and there's not sort of a backlash, as a result of President Obama's presidency. Well, we just can't take another Democrat, so we're going to vote Republican, even if, regardless of who it is. I hope that doesn't happen. I have some concern that there are those who just say, we need another white male. We did the black thing, it was a great experiment or whatever they want to call it, but we've had 8 years of that, and so now we need to go back to what we know. And if that's the case, then even Hillary, obviously, as a non-white male, is going to have some trouble overcoming that, because people just sort of want to return to the status quo. And to them, I would say, guess what the status quo is right now? For the last 8 years, the status quo has been an incredibly intelligent, eloquent, swaggerific black man. And so, let that be your base. And so anything up from that is going to be gravy. So we'll see. I think it's too early to call. Do not listen to any polls, unless it's Nate Silver and it's like, 2 months before the general in October of 2016. Don't believe it. Just don't. Just don't believe it. And so I think that we'll see how it goes. I am excited about the 2016 race. I think that it's going to be interesting. Obviously, without having President Obama as one of the candidates, I'm not going to have the energy that I did in 2008 and 2012. But I think it's important that we continue the work he started. And so, while I may have to hold my nose and vote for the Democratic president, I will do that, because, whoever the nominee is, because I just think that the Democratic platform as a whole speaks to me and my family much better than the Republican platform and any Republican candidate ever has. So that is me. For the past hour, you've heard me wax ad nauseum about politics in the 2016 race. I hope that was interesting to you. I once again want to say thank you to Ben Dixon for allowing me to guest host today. I'm going to give it one more shot, and I think we're going to have a special guest, which would be interesting, so you don't have to hear my voice for the full hour. But we're going to do that again really soon. I hope that you'll tune in again. If you're looking for me, I am Reign of April everywhere. So on Twitter, I am Reign of April, and that's REIGN of April. And I have my own website and Instagram and Facebook, and everything is Reign of April. That's where you'll find me. So this is April Reign saying thank you to Ben Dixon for allowing me to guest host the Benjamin Dixon Show. I had a lot of fun, and I hope to see you again soon.